The antique dealer had a way of looking at you, a sort of practiced sympathy that felt more like an appraisal. He stroked his neatly trimmed beard, his eyes flitting from my face to the polished wooden box on the counter between us. "A truly exquisite piece, Mr. Davies," he murmured, his voice a low hum. "Remarkable craftsmanship. Your uncle had impeccable taste." I just nodded, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. Impeccable taste, maybe, but Uncle Gerald also had a knack for the morbid and the mysterious. He'd lived his life on the fringes, collecting strange artifacts and rarer still, stranger stories. Now, even in death, he was still managing to surprise me. The exquisite piece in question was a golden horse, no bigger than my hand, nestled on a velvet cushion inside the box. It was crafted from what looked like pure gold, intricately detailed, with a flowing mane and tail that seemed to shimmer even in the subdued light of the shop. Its eyes, tiny black beads, held an unsettlingly lifelike gleam. The dealer had informed me it was an ancient Chinese artifact, possibly from the Tang dynasty, and worth a small fortune. "He left it to me in his will," I explained, feeling a strange mix of unease and a budding sense of responsibility. Gerald had always been a distant figure, a name whispered at family gatherings, usually followed by a cautionary tale about his eccentricities. I'd seen him maybe a handful of times in my life, brief, awkward encounters that usually ended with him staring at me with an unnerving intensity, as if searching for something. The dealer carefully closed the box, the click echoing in the quiet room. A generous inheritance. Though, I must confess, a piece of this nature often carries with it a certain weight. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Many believe older artifacts absorb the energies of their past owners, their environments. I scoffed, trying to dismiss the hint of superstition in his tone. "I'm sure it's just a very old horse, Mr. Peterson." He chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "Of course, Mr. Davies. Just a very old, very valuable horse." I walked out of the shop with a heavy box tucked under my arm, the afternoon sun feeling surprisingly cold on my skin. The golden horse, now mine, felt less like a gift and more like a burden. I'd planned on selling it, using the money for a down payment on a new apartment. But as I drove home, a strange reluctance settled over me. There was something about the horse, a peculiar allure that held me captive. That night, the golden horse sat on my bedside table, its polished surface catching the glow of the streetlights filtering through my window. I'd placed it there, almost unconsciously, drawn to its silent presence. Before I drifted off to sleep, I found myself staring at it, those tiny black eyes seeming to stare back, unblinking. I awoke with a jolt, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was pitch black, darker than it should have been. My eyes darted around, trying to discern shapes in the oppressive gloom. A sound, faint but distinct, had ripped me from my sleep. It was a rustling, a soft scraping that seemed to emanate from the living room. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thick with sleep and a sudden, inexplicable fear. Silence. Only the frantic thumping of my own heart in my ears. I told myself it was the old building settling, or maybe the wind. But the air in the room felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite name. I eventually drifted back to an uneasy sleep, waking in the morning feeling unrest and vaguely unsettled. The golden horse sat exactly where I'd left it, gleaming innocently in the morning light. I dismissed the night's events as a bad dream, a byproduct of an overactive imagination fueled by the antique dealer's spooky pronouncements. But the sounds didn't stop. The second night, it was a whisper. A soft, indistinct murmur that seemed to coil around the edges of my hearing. I sat bolt upright in bed, straining to decipher the hushed tones. It sounded like voices, faint and ancient, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. I flicked on my bedside lamp, flooding the room with a harsh light. The whispers vanished instantly, leaving behind a profound silence that felt even more unnerving. I got out of bed, my feet cold against the wooden floor, and padded into the living room. The room was empty, nothing disturbed. Yet, as I stood there, a cold gust of air brushed past my face, even though all the windows were closed. A shiver ran down my spine, and I found myself glancing back at the bedside table, at the golden horse. Its black eyes seemed to glint in the distance. The third night, things escalated. I was woken by a loud thud from the kitchen. I threw off my covers, my adrenaline surging. This wasn't a creak or a whisper. This was a physical noise. I grabbed the old baseball bat I kept by the door and crept towards the kitchen, my heart pounding in my ears. The kitchen light was off. As I fumbled for the switch, I felt a peculiar coldness in the air, a damp chill that permeated my bones. When the light flickered on, I gasped. Every single cabinet door was wide open, their contents spilling out onto the counters and floor. Pots and pans lay scattered, cutlery glinted under the harsh light. It was as if someone had ransacked the place. I stared at the chaos, my mind racing. Had someone broken in? But there was no sign of forced entry. The windows were locked, the front door secure. And nothing was missing. Nothing valuable, at least. Just a mess, a deliberate act of disruption. I spent the rest of the night cleaning up, every creak and groan of the old building making me jump. When I finally collapsed back into bed, exhausted and on edge, I found myself staring at the golden horse again. Its presence felt different now, less benign, more watchful. The strange occurrences continued, becoming more frequent and more unsettling. I'd wake in the middle of the night, convinced I'd heard my name whispered right next to my ear, a dry, raspy sound that sent chills down my spine. Sometimes, I'd see fleeting shadows dancing in my peripheral vision, gone the moment I turned my head. My sleep became a fragmented landscape of nightmares, vivid and terrifying. I dreamed of ancient rituals, of figures in flowing robes, of something cold and powerful reaching out from the darkness. One morning, I found a small, intricately carved wooden bird on my pillow. It wasn't mine. I didn't own anything like it. It was old, smooth from centuries of handling, and strangely, unsettlingly warm to the touch. I stared at it for a long time, my mind struggling to comprehend how it had gotten there. It was then, as I held the strange bird in my hand, that the pieces began to click into place. The whispers, the noises, the open cabinets, the shadows, the dreams, the pervasive sense of unease. It had all started after I brought the golden horse into my home. A cold dread seeped into my veins. Could it be? Could an inanimate object truly be responsible for such a string of unsettling events? I walked over to the bedside table and picked up the golden horse. It felt heavier than usual, almost vibrating with an unseen energy. Those black eyes seemed to bore into me, no longer just a reflection of the light, but alive, observing. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt a sudden, desperate urge to be rid of it. I knew I couldn't just throw it away. The idea of it being found, of someone else inadvertently inviting this into their lives, was unbearable. I had to bury it deep, where no one would ever find it. That evening, as dusk bled into night, I grabbed a shovel from the shed and wrapped the golden horse in a thick canvas bag, then sealed it with duct tape. I couldn't bear to touch its bare surface any longer. The air outside was still, unnaturally so, the usual chorus of crickets silent. A heavy sense of foreboding settled over me. I walked into the nearby forest, the familiar path now feeling alien and menacing under the dim light of the rising moon. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made me jump. I kept glancing over my shoulder, a primal instinct screaming at me that I wasn't alone. I felt a presence, cold and unseen, clinging to my back, a breath on my neck that wasn't the wind. Deeper and deeper I went, until the familiar landmarks of the path were lost behind me. I stopped at a clearing, a small patch of ground surrounded by ancient, towering trees. The moonlight barely pierced the dense canopy, leaving the clearing in an eerie twilight. This was it. I started digging, the shovel biting into the soft earth with a dull thud. Each scoop felt like an act of defiance against the unseen force that pressed in on me. As the hole deepened, the air grew colder, the oppressive silence broken only by the rhythmic scrape of the shovel. I felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching. A sudden gust of wind, cold and sharp, whipped through the clearing, despite the stillness of the surrounding air. The trees swayed above me, their branches creaking like ancient bones. I felt a surge of panic, my breath catching in my throat. The feeling of being watched intensified, a heavy, suffocating weight. Finally, the hole was deep enough. I placed the canvas bag containing the golden horse into the dark maw of the earth. As it settled, I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, right beside my ear. It wasn't words, not exactly, but a low, guttural murmur that seemed to hum with ancient malevolence. My blood ran cold. I started shoveling the dirt back into the hole, my movements frantic, desperate to cover the cursed object. Each shovelful felt like I was burying a part of myself, exorcising a dark entity that had taken root in my life. As the last mound of earth settled over the spot, I felt a release, a sudden lightening of the oppressive weight. But it was short-lived. As I turned to leave, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom of the trees. It wasn't a distinct shape, more like a shifting, large mass of darkness. It hovered at the edge of the clearing, just out of reach of the moonlight, yet undeniably present. A cold, piercing sensation shot through me, not physical pain, but a deep, bone-chilling dread. The whispers returned, louder this time, a chorus of spectral voices that seemed to coil around me, mocking and mournful. They spoke of ownership, of ancient pacts, of something lost and now found. I stumbled backward, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, desperate to escape. I ran through the dark forest, the sound of my own pounding footsteps deafening in my ears. The shadow followed, a silent, relentless presence at my heels. I could feel its gaze, a burning intensity that pierced through the darkness. The whispers trailed me, growing louder, more insistent, weaving a tapestry of dread around my very soul. I burst out of the forest, gasping for breath, my lungs burning. My house, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, had never looked so welcoming. I slammed the door shut behind me, leaning against it, trembling. The house was silent. The oppressive atmosphere was gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The whispers had stopped. I was alone. But as I slowly pushed myself away from the door, my eyes fell on my bedside table. There, nestled on the velvet cushion, gleaming in the faint light, was the golden horse. Its black eyes glinted, a silent, mocking testament to the insidious power of the ancient artifact. It hadn't just followed me out of the forest. It had always been here. And it wasn't going anywhere.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead,